Our next fellow-elect is Professor Skye McDonald, Professor of Psychology at UNSW.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very honoured to be here today. So my background is a subdiscipline of psychology called clinical neuropsychology, which is where we're interested in how brain lesions in people who suffer brain damage actually affect behaviour and cognition and thinking. And I worked as a clinician in this field for about 10 years before I did my PhD, working with people who had traumatic brain injuries from things like motor vehicle accidents and sporting accidents. And at that time, our tools were really restricted to things like, can a person learn, can a person use language, can a person pay attention, and so on. And I was struck by these patients who could talk perfectly well and could pay attention and so on, but when they did open their mouth, they just didn't do themselves any favours, and they were losing friends everywhere, and they were basically very inappropriate and saying things that were inappropriate and not getting the hint from other people. And so this led me on this journey of like, what's wrong with these people? What's going on? So I conducted my PhD in this field of looking at the things that underpin language. So even if language is intact, what other things do you need in order to be able to interact with other people? So things like being able to recognise emotions in the person that you're speaking to, because if they're really looking irritated while you're talking and you don't get that, it's very hard to curb your language to be appropriate. So that's been the long journey of my research over the last 20 to 30 years. And so social cognition is an area that's now become very, very hot in the neurosciences, trying to understand more about how these things like emotion perception occur, things like being able to make an estimation about what another person might be thinking when they're saying something. So, for example, sarcasm is where you say one thing but you actually mean something entirely different. And if you don't get that in Australia, you're fairly disadvantaged in any social setting. So it turns out sarcasm is a pretty sensitive way of picking up a lot of these difficulties. So I've now become interested in, particularly with emotion perception, if a person has difficulty recognising emotions in others, why might that be so? And so this is sort of leading into another area where I think neuropsychology is only just starting to catch up with the idea that one's bodily responses to social cues might actually be important information also. And this, of course, is not a new idea. Back in the 1890s, people were saying this. So if you see a dog running at you and the dog's sort of salivating and baring its teeth, you feel you have goosebumps and your heart races. And the idea is that those cues from your body actually let you know, oh, I'm afraid. That idea was poo-pooed back then as being too general. But now we're actually realising that these physiological kind of responses that people have are really important cues to understanding social events. And my work with these people with traumatic brain injuries is showing that they can actually say that something's very negative if they look at something that's really very negative, but they don't feel anything. And so we're trying to understand more about this disconnect between what people are feeling and what they're thinking, and seeing if we can do something more about understanding how to measure that, and also understanding more about how to treat that. So that's the kind of journey that I've been on and the kinds of areas that I've been interested in. And we've recently been really fortunate to get some funding from both NHMRC and ARC to continue to look at these things and actually to trial some new treatments to see if we can actually do something to perhaps re-engage these impaired processes that aren't working. So that's me. Thank you.